So today I'm going to be reviewing Where the Crawdads Sing. The way I do my spoiler-free reviews is I give 3 pros and 3 cons, spoiler-free about the book so that you can decide if it's the right book for you. Because I buddy read this book with my friend Teresa over at the channel Ivymuse, which will be linked in the description of this video. You should definitely check her out. We decided to try something new and we're gonna do a buddy review. So this is gonna look a little bit different. Instead of the 3 pros and 3 cons, since Teresa and I basically had pretty much all the same thoughts about this book, we are condensing it to 3 pros and 2 cons, and we're gonna bounce back and forth giving those. So before we get into the pros and the cons, just a really quick synopsis breakdown about this book, because I definitely don't think it's going to be for everybody. Where the Crawdads Sing is an extremely slow-moving, character-driven story. So we start out with a girl who is in an abusive, neglectful home, and she's got a rough life. We get a little bit of her childhood, and then she grows up and she continues to live in the marsh and deemed the marsh girl. She's looked down on. There's a lot of prejudice surrounding her. This is historical fiction as well. And the whole story is really wrapped around Kaya and what she goes through and her personal journey. Wow. So there's this side plot that happens where somebody is killed, and that's one timeline, is the trial and trying to pin the murder on someone and trying to figure out who done it. And then the other timeline is growing up with Kaya. So we have little snippets of this murder mystery, and the biggest part of the story is just growing up with Kaya. Now, the plot is the murder mystery, but in my opinion, you could remove that plot and replace it with literally anything else, and the story would be the same, because the point of the story isn't the plot. The plot is just the thing that gives us something to aim towards in the end. The point of the story is Kaya and her life. With this being such a slow-moving, character-driven, atmospheric book, it will not be everybody's cup of tea. Teresa and I happen to really enjoy it. I think we both gave it 4 stars. And here are our thoughts. Spoiler-free, pros and cons, starting with Teresa.
Hi, I'm Teresa from the channel Ivymuse, and I'm here to give you my very first pro for Where the Crawdads Sing. Basically, I absolutely love the writing in this book. It's not just the words that the author chose, but the way that she really managed to bring the setting of the marsh and the small town in the 60s alive. I really felt like I was there with Kaya, experiencing the story. And I know that for some people, maybe all of these descriptions of nature and the wild and what the setting is like might be a little bit boring, but I personally couldn't disagree more. I thought it was so well done and so well constructed and really made the book such an atmospheric read that I was never bored, even though it doesn't have a lot of plot per se.
So to piggyback on Teresa's pro, also a pro for me is the characters, and it's kind of in the same vein. It all has to do with the writing, how atmospheric it is, but the characters are very well developed. They're 3-dimensional. Throughout the story, I really felt like I was reading someone's true story. I didn't feel like I was reading a fiction novel, which is of course what you want. You want these characters to feel real, and I think that the author executed that perfectly. I became very attached to this character, Kaya, very quickly. And as a reader who is, I like really strong, well fleshed out characters, but I really like plot as well. And with a story that is essentially missing plot, I still enjoyed it so much and wanted to pick it up the entire time I was reading it. And that's, I think, a testament to how well this author did at making the characters so authentic that I wanted to follow her, despite there not being a reason to follow her, really.
My second pro would be the pacing of the book. Again, I know this is very personal to me probably, but I love the way that the story was told. I think a story like this that is very character focused and very much also focused on the details of what is happening and not so much big plot points that I kind of worked through. It's quite easy for a story like that to get caught up on describing all these details and sort of leave the reader behind because you just kind of get bored. That to me wasn't at all the case in this book. I always felt like I wanted more, and I was excited to see where Kaya's life would go next, what she would do next, what would happen next, even though it was just the small things of her everyday life and nothing spectacular most of the time. And again, I know some people dislike the portion at trial, that they felt kind of dragged out. But again, I would disagree. I think it was all paced appropriately. I never felt like it was too stretched out for suspense reasons or anything like that. They worked through the trial pretty methodically, but also to the point and kind of sticking to the story. So I really enjoyed myself throughout this entire book. I thought it had really good pacing for the most part, and we'll get to that later. I personally just think it's the kind of book that you can pick up and read and read and read and never get bored. And if you are forced to put it down, you immediately want to get back to it, which to me personally is the perfect book.
Jumping into the cons, we each only have one, and we pretty much agree, though we each feel a little bit more strongly about our individual cons. My con is that I've seen it all before. This story, Kaya is uniquely Kaya, but the structure of this story, as well as the plot and just the entire way the whole thing played out, been there, done that. The fact that there is a murder mystery, somebody died, who done it, we gotta figure it out, there's a trial, snippets of the trial, but the main focus is on the character. Everything that I said, this book is wrapped around that entire structure. I've read this book before. I've read this structure. Someone died, murder mystery, trial, focus on the character. I've read it multiple times. Now that doesn't bother me because sometimes structures for stories are reused. There's not an infinite number of ideas in the world. However, this story didn't deviate whatsoever from how I've seen it done before. I knew who done it the entire time. Unquestionable. I knew exactly how it would play out. I knew when it would be revealed who done it. I didn't know how it would be revealed, but when it was revealed at the exact time that I expected it to be, and it was revealed exactly who I expected it to be. And I don't mind that this all looks familiar. I was just kind of hoping that at the end, the book would do something a little bit different. It doesn't have to be extremely different, just something different. But it didn't. It did everything exactly how I've seen it done before. Now, if you've never read this book, not this book, if you've never read this structure, that clearly won't bother you, because the first time I read it, it was awesome. Second time I read it, it was pretty cool. Third time, I'm not as impressed. Again, books following a similar structure, this is something that happens. It's not like where the Crawdad scene has, where the Crawdads sing. It's not like this book has committed some horrible sin by looking like other books. Plenty of books look like other books. So, don't take this as a really harsh criticism. It's just that I found that the ending didn't quite satisfy me because I've read this structure I've read this structure several times, so I didn't find it entirely satisfying. Didn't ruin the book for me, still gave it 4 stars, but it just would have been cool if it did something a little different.
And then the one con that I personally have is that even though I felt like the pacing throughout most of the book was done really, really well, as I mentioned earlier, the ending felt quite rushed to me. Basically, the trial concludes and the verdict is read, and then everything else is sort of almost like an epilogue. It's sort of just ticked off a list. To me, it seemed like that at least. It basically felt like, okay, the main portion of the book is now done, but because the author wanted to tie up the loose ends, she just basically kind of did it in a to-do list almost. So it's okay, then I have her do this, then I have revealed this, then I do this, and it all kind of feels very rushed at that point. Sort of some revelations are made very rushed, some changes happen very rushed. And then it also does this thing which I really dislike in books, is when the story itself only focuses on a specific time period or event in a person's life, but then when the main story is concluded, it jumps ahead to the end of their life. I don't know, it's a very personal thing. I have no particular reason for disliking it other than that I just don't. I kind of like my stories ending at the end of the story, basically. I don't need to know everything else that happens in that person's life. And I like that shred of mystery that is left when we just don't know where life is gonna take them next.
So that's all we have for you. Teresa and I pretty much felt the same about this book. We both really, really loved the experience of reading it. We both recommend it if it sounds like something that interests you. For my character-driven readers that are constantly wishing for me to love the same books as you, this may be one that we can discuss. If you've read this book, if you plan on reading it, please chat with us more about it in the comments, and please check out Teresa's channel. She's one of my favorite YouTubers. She is an auto-click person. I always click on her videos, and she's just a great person to know. So please check her out. Again, link in the description, and next time we buddy read a book, we will buddy review it again over on her channel. I post videos every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.